Hi, everyone. It's Marty Gottesfeld. Sorry it's taken me a little while to get this response up on YouTube. I was placed in administrative segregation last night when I got back to the Plymouth County Correctional Facility. Ostensibly, they were worried that I was going to commit suicide like the last activist, Aaron Swartz, whom this same prosecutor's office and this same judge drove to kill himself. I think, though, certainly a non-trivial side benefit for the U.S. Attorney's Office, this judge, and this jail, who tries to ingratiate itself with this U.S. Attorney's Office and this judge, was that I was unable to respond or return comments or talk about the verdict when the U.S. Attorney's Office released their press release yesterday. And just want to talk a little bit about this stuff and kind of what I would have said if I had not been extrajudicially denied of the opportunity to do that. First, the government did not get the jury to convict on kind of the meat of the charge, the most damning kind of allegation that they've been trying to make for 2.5 years, and they've used it to try to deny me bail. They've used it to try to paint me as like a bogeyman. I said it wasn't true in my first article in the Huffington Post nearly 2 years ago. Rolling Stone followed up and said it wasn't true in their investigation, and now a federal jury has also said no to the government on this. The jury would not convict me, did not convict me for having any impact or even any potential impact on treatment, diagnosis, etc. of patients. So no patients harmed, no patients even potentially harmed. That was one big thing about this verdict. It is actually kind of a split verdict in that regard. And of course, the DOJ does not mention that in their press release. They leave everyone to assume somehow that patients could have been affected without going out of their way, of course, to mention that the jury wouldn't say that. And then, okay, so another part, their press release, of course, makes no mention of Justina or her suffering. Once again, it's as if to them she is not a human being. She is not worthy of mention. She is some kind of subhuman inconvenience to them as far as they're concerned. I think that's just morally reprehensible and completely despicable. These prosecutors, Carmen Ortiz, who started the case, Adam Bookbinder, who quit after the 2 o'clock news, kind of put him on display and for his awfulness. And then the current prosecutors, David J. Diadio and Seth Costo. And Seth Costo's wife, Stacey Eisenberg, actually did her residency at Boston Children's Hospital, so he's far from a disinterested party. And Judge Gorton, who has serious financial and other ties to associates of this hospital and the partners of this hospital. They really wanted to get that enhancement, that part of the verdict, I'm sure. And jury wouldn't do it. Even when they have the deck tilted in their favor, even when I'm coming from jail at 5 a.m. every day to go to trial, half asleep, even when they outnumber my lawyer 2-1, and they've had 4 years at this case and he's had 4 months. Even with all those advantages, the deck completely stacked and a biased judge, they still couldn't get the jury to convict on that. So what they have essentially is, these people tortured Justina, and she's still in a wheelchair today, and they won't go after the people who did that to her. They won't enforce her federal civil rights. They won't go after them for any of the federal statutes which were allegedly broken by the hospital in their so-called treatment of Justina. But they will go after me for simply costing those people money. And, how much money are Justina's legs worth? I mean, you can't quantify it. There is no amount. There's no dollar amount that makes up for what happened to her. She's a human being. She's priceless. And to these people, to David Diadio, to the new U.S. Attorney Andrew Relling, who is Carmen Ortiz's former head of economic crimes, right? The money that the Harvard Hospital claims to have lost is paramount. And Justina Pelletier isn't even worth mentioning in a press release. That's who these people are. that's how history is going to record them and remember them. And that's who I'm up against. That's the corruption at play here. And that's just the moral depravity at play here. I want to thank everyone for their support. And I want to tell everyone I'm not going to give up. There never should have been a trial on this in the first place. The Speedy Trial Act actually required the case to have been thrown out before that. I think Judge Gorton wanted to have the case. He wanted to have the trial because it's good publicity for him. Judges like big cases like these. So I think he basically ignored the law just to proceed to trial. I don't expect the First Circuit Court of Appeals to uphold his speedy trial ruling. I also expect to win on suppression if need be. More came out about not Judge Gorton, but the magistrate judge who had signed off on the search warrant for my home that started this whole thing. Magistrate Judge Marianne B. Bowler, who is also known to systematically violate people's rights under the Bail Reform Act. She worked for Harvard Medical School before becoming a judge. Her husband still works at Harvard Medical School now, and he's also a paid practitioner at Harvard-affiliated Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. We had put forward a motion saying that the warrant was invalid because this judge was not neutral. You have a right to a neutral judge hearing a warrant application. They can't bring a warrant application to a biased judge and have the warrant stand up. So we had said, she's biased and the search has got to get tossed. The prosecution came back and said, she's not biased. You can't show that there was, enough of an impact on her husband's work, or that, she still cared enough about these institutions after having worked for them and after having been on the board of a charity that donated to them, to merit suppression of the search. It came out, though, from the government's own witnesses, from one Boston Children's Hospital witness, from a witness from the company that Boston Children's hired to try to mitigate the DDoS, and actually from one of the prosecutors, David J. Diadio, who mentioned Bowler's workplace by name in his closing argument, that her workplace was, inexorably linked to these events, that Harvard, in particular, was inexorably linked. The DDoS mitigation expert said that I had single-handedly knocked all of Harvard off the internet, and every single Harvard hospital, all off the internet. And so to try to say that someone who has deep ties to Harvard, deep ties to Harvard Medical School, and deep ties to a Harvard hospital that was allegedly affected by this, that even the prosecution says was allegedly affected by this, that she could be a neutral and detached arbiter, I think strains credulity. And now that this is out on the record, I expect that we would win on suppression as well, if need be. We're also going to be thinking about filing for bail pending sentencing and bail pending appeal. Hopefully, if we take those up to the First Circuit Court of Appeals and they take a look at what our appellate grounds are going to be and the new evidence to support them, they will look favorably on that bail request. So I intend to continue fighting. I hope everyone else does too. And I'm going to keep fighting for institutionalized children like Justina. If I had it all to do over again, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. And in fact, knowing now what I know now, because Justina has been able to speak. At the time, Justina wasn't able to speak. Right? She spoke in notes that she smuggled out of the psych ward that her family spoke about and in one case published. She spoke silently from her wheelchair when her family smuggled pictures of her in that wheelchair out to the public. And she spoke to her sisters who would relay things to the media that Justina had told them and record videos outside the places where Justina was locked up. Well, in the years since then, Justina has spoken. She's done some interviews. And I would do it all again in a heartbeat. In fact, I would do it even sooner. I waited to vet the case to be sure that, it really was what it was. And I actually regret not acting sooner. Because if Justina had gone home just one day earlier, maybe she'd be skating again today. So I'm not going to give up. I hope no one else gives up either. Let's keep being a loud, persistent voice for these kids because they need champions, and they deserve champions.